Hello, everyone. My name is Sinead Glynn, and I'm a product manager with IBM. I'm here today to talk to you about AIOPS from IBM, and in particular, how you can put your applications on autopilot using the power of AI-powered automation. My own particular function, as I mentioned, I'm a product manager. I specialize in working with global partners, particularly global system integrators. And I have a background in both AI-powered automation technologies, but in particular in AIOps. So that's why I'm here to talk to you today. I'm going to take you just through some of the background in terms of the market. I'm going to talk about some of our unique selling points. I'm going to do a very brief flyby from a technology perspective. And then I'm just going to finish up with some internal context where you can get some more information for yourselves or for your teams. So just to talk firstly about, I suppose, the background as to why these technologies are so important. I'm sure it comes as no surprise to you that the rate and pace of digitalization has increased very dramatically in the last year. You know, it's really hockey sticked in terms of progress. We all know that the reasons behind this, the recent crisis. And one of the top reasons when the CIOs were, I suppose, reviewed in terms of, you know, what was their main reason for accelerating their digitalization. The key thing that they identified, the top reason they identified, was a need to make you know, to react more quickly. So to help their organizations become much more reactive, that was the key thing. Now, what was also interesting is that in these activities in terms of accelerating their digitalization, they realized how immature their organizations actually were. So that just threw a spotlight on it. And by the way, the research I'm citing is available in the slides, which you can get in the speaker notes. So, you know, the pandemic progressed and they put in place some stopgaps, frankly, in a lot of cases to assure the business. But now that we're coming out of the kind of the major peak of the crisis, they've returned to these, and 96% are now reporting that they plan to speed their digitalization plans and reinvention plans and make these a priority, because they understand that, you know, they really do need to take stock and look at how they're doing things to become more resilient, to become more agile, more operationally intelligent, which is where AIOps comes in. And it's to make sure that they're, you know, that this is done in order to position their organizations for sustained growth and for long-term health. So this has really ignited the digital invention era. Now, if we kind of think about this then from an IT perspective and, you know, what the impact this is having on IT, the one thing we know for absolute certain is that you can't achieve high levels of digitalization without intelligent automation. And the reason for this is simply humans can't scale to the challenges without help. That's a real fundamental. The other key thing that we know is that in the digitalized world, the application is the business and the business is the applications. The application is really, really centric. So with this ever increasing complexity that's driven from the digitalization, we have to augment the human. We have to augment them with AI-powered automation. Otherwise, we can't, you know, we're in the innovation versus stability. We can't achieve both. So that's a fundamental. You know, they're not going to be able to negotiate the complexity. They're not going to be able to pivot to put the application and the user experience at the center of what's done. That's going to be too challenging. And also, they're going to have challenges in terms of retaining important talent. So these are the kind of the key challenges. So AIOps is the market that addresses these particular challenges. And IBM, we've been you know, part of this market for a number of years. We have a background in IT operations. But really in the last 2 years, we've really amped up our investment in this particular area, both organically and inorganically. Just this year, we've closed 2 acquisitions, very important acquisitions. One is for an observability solution in Stana. They're now part of the IBM family. And the other, more recently in Q2, is a game-changing technology from a company called Turbonomic, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So if we, focus on this idea of how you can put your application performance assurance on autopilot, how you can do that with software, that you don't need, people to do this task. You can do it much better at scale. The first key building block in any AIOps strategy is observability. You've got to get observability. And I mentioned Instana. Instana is, our preferred observability solution. Now, it's not required, but it is our preferred. And Instana provides, it's a cloud native, born in the cloud, very light, very agile, fast time to value solution to give you that full stack observability. But then the important point is we take the output of your observability solutions, IBM or otherwise. Typically, large enterprises, by the way, have between 9 and 40 different performance management solutions through the entire stack. But anyway, we can take all of that output from your performance management and observability solutions, and we apply AI to it. So, we take those metrics and we normalize the data and observe the data in a common model. And this is where we really start to differentiate. What we do then is we apply basically financial models and market-based models to create a supply chain, because fundamentally, this is a supply and demand problem. The application requires the infrastructure to supply it with what it needs. And this is patented, by the way. Turbonomic is the only technology that can do this. So then we identify what is required. We actually identify the action. So this is not, hey, human, there's something wrong, you need to go figure it out. The software figures out what the right action is. We ensure that we're staying within the policies of the enterprise. And then we can automatically and dynamically allocate those resources. They can be in recommendation or fully automatic mode, whatever suits the culture of the company. We dynamically allocate the resources, make sure the application has enough resources, but not too little or not too much. So we're keeping that balance. And then we continuously validate performance, creating this virtuous loop of continuously validating performance and continuously and dynamically allocating the resources, both for user experience and for efficiency. And just in terms of, the reassurance of how successful the particular technology is, Turbonomic, this is just an overview of some of the clients that we have, and you'll see, it spans all of the major vertical industries. We've over 3,000 clients. We've 1/3 of the Fortune 500. This is a solution that major companies are depending on in order to optimize their cloud and infrastructure spend, as well as assure performance across their key applications. So I'm going to now go into a technology demo, a very brief one. But I do want to, just before we get there, I want to double click on the problem of why humans can't scale. I kind of flew by that one. And then I want to talk about our unique selling points, so something we can do that nobody else can, and that's to help you scale beyond human. And there's 3 things that we do uniquely. I mentioned the supply chain approach and the patented technology that we have there. So I'm going to take you through that in a little bit more detail. I'm then going to touch on the AI-derived actions and also the ability that we have to do what-if scenarios to help you plan the safest, very important, but also most optimized plans as you're optimizing, you're migrating to cloud, etc. The technology helps in those use cases as well. So to talk about, okay, why humans can't scale, just a very brief history lesson. And I'm embarrassed to say that I'm actually old enough to, or long enough in the business to remember some of the beginnings of these quadrants. If we think about components and what you're managing, we've gone from physical worlds to virtualized worlds to, cloud-based worlds and so on to containers. The number of components managed by the infrastructure teams have, dramatically increased in the last few years. And then you think about cadence in terms of, agility and the need to push out new updates in terms of your applications. I remember a time when we used to do releases every 1 or 2 years. But, obviously most organizations are now at monthly, some are at daily, and there's even, a cohort that are doing real time. And often there is a mix of this across an organization. Then we think about stakeholders. You know, again, in the past, it used to be very defined. There was IT operations. They had a very kind of set rules or scope of work. But now we've got network operations and cloud operations. And of course, we've got development and line of business. And then similarly with management tools, again, in the past, there would have been, you know, a single set of tools across the enterprise, but particularly, you know, DevOps teams and line of business, they're purchasing their own solutions. So the number of tools in the environment has also dramatically increased. But then if we kind of think about, right, let's go right back to the point I made that in digitalization, the application is king. So when issues do happen, the challenge we have is there are silo teams. So there might be an application team looking at App Dynamics or Instana indeed, or, you know, any of the major APM or observability vendors. And when there's an issue, they'll call down to the infrastructure team, and the infrastructure team has a completely other set of solutions. So, you know, the application team, they're looking at the performance. They're obviously the ones doing the application development. Then it typically would go to the infrastructure team or the IT operations team, and they have their own set of products and solutions. And if they can't find the issue, it will often go to the network team. And the network team, they're managing the network that the application is running on, trying to make sure that there's no bottlenecks. But it's bouncing around, and it can be very challenging. And what we're doing uniquely is we're taking the data and the insights across those different layers, and we're providing a single view of what the application looks like. Now, I'm sure you're looking at this and you may have seen other vendors with kind of similar topology-based views. This is a lot more nuanced and a lot more valuable than that, because in addition to actually providing a dynamic service map, which is what this is, we're applying those that AI technology that actually looks at it from a supply and demand perspective. So right up at the top, the application has a particular demand. The infrastructure is supplying with resources to do that. And that is all you know, done in real time as it's happening. As to, you know, why is that important? Why is it so important to have the application stack monitored in real time? The reason is that the user demand of the application isn't static. We all know there's peaks and troughs. It could be the time of the day, it could be the day of the week, it could be the fact that you've just run a sales campaign and, you know, suddenly something is selling really fast. You know, it could be fashion, it could be weather, it could be anything, who's to know. But the point is that the demand on the application is continuously changing, and that continuously drives congestion in different elements of the application and the infrastructure. And this is really, really difficult to manage in complex environments. And this is why the humans need help. But the good news is we can certainly help with this. And the way we do that is that we're taking the world of the application performance, you know, typically you're focused on things like response time and transaction throughput, etc. We're taking that and we're combining it with the infrastructure world. And I mentioned it's a supply and demand. What we're doing in the infrastructure world is not just telling you, if you've good eyesight, you'll see there that the storage is red. We're not just telling you that there's a problem with the storage. We're giving you the actual actions to address the problem in storage. And those actions are identified based on what the software knows of the need of the application. So these aren't random, you know, stock answers. This is worked out from how the application is actually using that infrastructure. That is the unique selling point. Now, I'm going to flick to the demo and hopefully you can see the screen. So just a very, very quick flyby here in terms of what this looks like. So this is one of our demo systems. In this particular environment, there's 27 different business applications. They're running 60 different business transactions. And you can see here, you know, it's based on various services, down to application components, containers, pods. Some of them are running on containers and pods. Some of them are running on virtual machines, down into the virtual data center, down to the hosts, right down to the disk array and chassis and the storage controller and the storage, etc., etc. So it's that full view of what the application looks like. And if I just click on one of the applications here, What you see here, it's a mobile banking application. You can see at the application layer, there are some critical items identified. You're seeing the full application as I scroll down here. The point here is you can see that we've got the storage is red, so there's issues here. And if I click here just on the actions, just to briefly show you the type of actions that the software has identified, you'll see that here that there's a number of actual actions that have been identified that are categorized as performance. And they are the challenges. And then there's other actions that are identified as efficiency. So just to flick back then to the deck and to talk about that. So it's this ability to not just tell you something's gone wrong. That's the kind of the supply chain. It's the ability to tell you what actions need to be taken in order to keep the application in that stable, fully resourced state. So this isn't like other paradigms that, you set thresholds and you react to things going wrong. This is incredibly proactive. This is, I want the application to be fully resourced, and it tells you how to do it. The action categories tends to be around application performance, which I talked about. There's also actions in terms of efficiencies. We typically identify between 30 and 50% infrastructure reduction costs as part of the analysis that the software does. And then there's preventative and compliance actions as well. The actions, oops, excuse me, I clicked on too fast there. The actions typically come under things like provision or start or buy RI or move or configure. They're the kind of the types of actions that are taken. And then the mode in which the actions can be taken either can be just in a kind of a recommendation mode. It can be in a manual mode where you click and you execute, or indeed you might route it to something like ServiceNow from a change request perspective. That's all fully integrated. Or it can run in fully automatic mode, where it's actually dynamically doing that. And there's a progression here in terms of the trust of the AI, and we've got clients at every single stage in this process. So that's the actions. The third key differentiator that we have is this ability to run the what-if scenarios. And built into the solution, we've got common planning use cases. So you'll see things here like migrate to cloud. You might be doing a hardware refresh, adding virtual machines, merging clusters, etc. Migrate to cloud is a very common one, and there's just a screenshot here. But what differentiates us here is that it will do a comparison in terms of either just a simple lift and shift or an optimized. In this particular example, it's to AWS. So you load up your licensing and your constraints in terms of your contract with the cloud provider, and it will then calculate how to do this. So you'll see things like, if you just do a simple lift and shift, how many virtual machines, how many on-demand compute costs, etc. And you can see there that it actually calculates, number one, how to improve your performance in the optimized plan, and number two, how to do that as effectively and efficiently as possible. So you can see here that some items are going up in cost and some items are coming down, but overall there's a 42% reduction in the cost in the optimized plan. So we're going from 58,000 to 34,000 per month. And this gives you the confidence in order to have the conversation around that migration plan. Okay, so just then to talk about one more item, just in terms of the breadth of integrations that Turbonomic has. I've mentioned Instana, but obviously we've got integrations with all of the major application performance management and observability solutions. We've got connectors into the common provisioning and orchestration solutions. You can see the various vendors there. Containers, all the major flavors, databases, virtualization, down into public cloud, into hyperconverged, and so on out to the network. So there's just some logos here. We also have, I suppose, bespoke way of connecting into various elements of the infrastructure if you don't have these particular logos. So, we can do it and create your supply chain view of your applications. Okay, and then, okay, so I've talked about what we do from an Instana perspective, observability for faster decision making. I talked about Turbonomic in terms of doing that dynamic resource management and cost optimization to make sure that your applications are on autopilot. But I'm going to talk about the third leg of the stool, which is about problem determination, remediation, and avoidance. So this is about, you know, what happens when say your first line of defense isn't working. You know, if it's not a resource issue, if something else has happened in the environment to cause an outage or an issue, how AI and automation can help accelerate the humans in that particular instance. So just again to lay out the problem, and this actually comes from a case study that we did with a particular client where we looked at one particular incident that they had. Unfortunately, the incident nearly lasted 5 hours. 17 different steps were required. And by steps, I mean to log into different machines or different applications or solutions, management tools generally. 10 different people were required. They had to keep bringing in experts in different elements of the organization. And ultimately, the cost of the outage was about 420K in this particular example. What we can do with Watson AIOPS is effectively run down the more mundane aspects of what the humans had to do in that particular incident. So, you know, instead of having to manually log into all these systems, try and trace through where the problem is, we can dramatically accelerate or even skip those steps for you by doing it with software and AI. So we're assisting the engineer to become much more effective. In this particular example, we were able to reduce the outage time to just under 15 minutes. We were able to reduce the number of steps the human had to take from 17 to 4, and we were able to reduce the number of people involved in the particular issue from 10 to 1, and drop the overall cost of the particular issue down to 17K. So it just gives you an idea of you know, the type of acceleration. And just to kind of, I suppose, explain it in a little bit more detail as to how that happens. If you think about incident resolution without AIOps, so this is kind of the normal situation that IT operation teams face. So the incident would typically start to appear in the logs, the very early stages of an issue. Typically, you're starting to see errors appearing, or you know, something start to happen in the logs, and then maybe a short while later, something to do with the performance is starting to happen. And you know, I mentioned, you know, you could have between 9 and 40 different performance management systems in a typical large enterprise. They're probably going to have more than one logging system, typically 2, 3, 4. But you know, the data has started to emerge. The textbook would say you should be doing observability. It's really difficult to scale that. So most organizations don't pick it up in the observability stages. They pick it up once it has actually deviated beyond some sort of defined performance criteria. Typically, events have been sent to an event management system, and from there, an incident or a ticket is cut. And that's really where the clock starts. But the incident has actually been going on for quite some time by the time the humans are even alerted that there is an issue. And then the humans, they have to start tracing back through the event systems, back into what does this application or service look like, pulling in various, you know, the network person, the database person, et cetera, and trying to dig down into the different performance management systems and into the logs, et cetera. So this is where you have the 5 hours, 17 steps, 10 different people, et cetera, trying to trace down what the issue is. So that's the kind of as is. What we can do with AIOps is that basically we can hook into those existing systems, and by applying AI to your logs and your metrics, we can get the very early stages of this developing. And we can do things like trending and forecasting and dynamic thresholding to pick up on it really early. As time goes on, we can do weighted analysis and event clustering and blast radius analysis to help the human understand that, well, if this is an issue, what else is it affecting, probable cause, recurring events, historical analysis, etc. But it's by doing all of these things and collating them in a way that the humans understand, this is how we can accelerate them. So where they would have had to do this manually, trying to find the needle in the haystack, basically we make the needle a heck of a lot bigger, and we reduce the size of the haystack so they can see where the issues are and resolve the problem far faster. Okay, so I'm just on my wrap up slides now, and you know, just to kind of touch on, just to repeat kind of where we are. So from an AIOps perspective, right, IBM, we're very maniacally focused on applying AIOps to solve two big problems. One is to improve the user experience of your clients, and number two is to optimize your costs. The key benefits are your applications will perform. Your applications are resourced and continuously optimized. Your data center and cloud spend is continuously optimized. You will continuously adhere to policies. So that becomes, driven by software. And most importantly, you're freeing up your human capital, your application and your IT teams to get away from these mundane tasks, and to retain them and to have them innovate on customer experience, which is what is the key thing from a digitalized world. So they're the key benefits. In terms of breadth of use cases, I mean, we transverse all of the performance of workloads and applications in any hybrid or multi-cloud environment. So you're talking about private cloud, public cloud, all of the major public cloud vendors. Doesn't matter if it's VMs, doesn't matter if it's even hardware, containers, even out to the virtual desktop infrastructure. That's all kind of encompassed as part of the use cases. And you can see, the typical ROIs there. I'm not going to read them, but you're seeing, improvements in application response time because they're resourced properly. You're seeing dramatic falls in the cost of on-premise and public cloud resources because of optimization, reductions in downtime, reductions in mean time to repair. That means incident duration, and improvements in productivity because the humans can focus on what they're good at and not have to trace through the mundane stuff. And improvements in time to market as well. So, they're typically the ROIs that we have. In terms of, who you should be targeting, you're talking about the CIO, site reliability engineering, cloud ops, and the developer. They're kind of the key folks to identify. I have the scenarios laid out there at the bottom in terms of, are they looking for observability? Is that their problem? Then we lead with Instana. If they don't have that issue, they will have an issue with trying to do application performance assurance dynamically, and that's where we lead with Turbonomic. And also they might have issues around proactive incident avoidance and resolution, and that's where we lead with Watson AIOPS. It's important to know who to avoid. That's actually probably more important. So, if they're not modernizing, if they're not moving to microservices, Kubernetes, containers, cloud native architecture, if they're still extremely traditional, they may not have the problems that we solve. That's number one. Number two is if they're completely and utterly focused on cost management, as opposed to, improved mean time to repair or improved user experience and application performance. They're not the best candidates either, because we'll just get compared to solutions that frankly don't meet our capabilities. And also, you need a certain size of IT footprint in order to have the problems that I've talked about. So, avoiding those smaller IT footprints. So, looking for, 500 workloads or greater. Certainly, they're the clients to target. And then my last slide. What to do if you want to learn more. So Hema is your IBM Alliance Cloud leader locally there in Sagetti. So certainly reach out to her. My email address, by the way, is at the beginning of the slide deck, so you can get that from there as well. Please feel free. I've also included some links here into our Seismic. It's one of our tools that everyone has access to. You do need an IBM ID to access it, and certainly Hema can help you with that if you're not aware how to do that. But you can see, there's more detail in terms of playbooks and elevator pitches and, all the sales kits by product and technical enablement as well for your technical teams if you're interested. And certainly I'd be happy to arrange for bespoke business development, sales enablement, technical enablement if you're interested in any of these technologies. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope you're enjoying Sagetti's Got Talent. Thank you.